Hello again, everybody, and great to be with you again for another Motorsport Magazine podcast. And today is one for all you bikers, well, all you racers, really. But we're on two wheels today because we have with us Jeremy McWilliams. He's come all the way from Belfast to be with us today. Well done, Jeremy. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Fantastic. In this podcast today, it's slightly different because we'll be talking to Jeremy, and we've also got lots of nice questions from you, our listeners. But we'll also be getting into our Motorsport Magazine Hall of Fame, won't we, Damien?
Yes, so we've had Formula One, we've had sports cars, and now we're looking at the motorcycle world. So today we're going to ask Jeremy, and we've got Mat Oxley with us as well, who's our motorcycle correspondent, to talk about the great heroes of motorcycle racing and who should go on the short list of 12 who you can then vote for to go into the Hall of Fame next year.
Okay. Jeremy McWilliams is a pretty obvious choice, I should think, wouldn't you? Anyway, okay, yeah, we have Mat Oxley, Damien Smith, Simon Aaron, and of course, next to me here, Jeremy. Can I start with something I read about you last night, which is that until Scott Redding came along, you were the only man to get a pole or a win in a MotoGP championship race for a whole decade. Is that right?
I think it even seemed like longer than that, to be honest. Yeah, it went on forever and ever. It was always this this kind of thing in the background that somebody had to pick it up from way back in the Barry Sheene days, really. And I was lucky. I wasn't obviously the greatest Grand Prix racer of from our shores anyway. I don't believe, but lucky enough to pick up a win in Assen in 2001. A couple of pole positions and a couple of decent races and podiums before and afterwards, but I suppose that that win was just, it was kind of always there for the taking, and I'd never been in the position or it just hadn't really worked out for me, so it kind of played into my hands because the weather wasn't perfect at Assen, and we made the correct tyre choice. And at the time I remember having a real argument with Dieter Stappert, my team boss, who he wanted me to go with we were on the front row and he wanted me to go with the same tyres as everybody else. Everybody was using wets and I decided to use intermediates. So, that was kind of half the reason, that we got there. But there was times before that where I'd finished second in Germany in 1998 with Valentino and Caparossi just in behind me, and I think Harada won that race. So there were, I believe, other better races, but of course, a win's a win.
God, wouldn't it be wonderful to say, and Valentino Rossi behind me? Fantastic. Wow, that's worth dining out on. By the way, I should tell you, everybody, that we're in the Chelsea Ram, which is our local pub for Motorsport Magazine. The reason we're here is quite complicated. It's all to do with Jeremy's travelling arrangements. But anyway, we are also moving offices. This coming weekend, we're moving up to Finchley in North London. So we thought it was only right that we should have one last session in the Chelsea Ram. So that's just to explain the surroundings. You rode for Yamaha, you rode for Aprilia, Team KR, you rode for Ilmor. I mean, it's a fantastic career. Do you look back on it and with real pride and pleasure, or do you sometimes think, oh, if only I'd done this, that, or the other?
I think Matt will back me up on this one, but we've always kind of been on the, absolutely no regrets, but never really got to the front of the pecking order for factory machinery. And I suppose that's part to do with having a passport from Northern Ireland. It's probably more difficult to get a ride when you're from either UK, Northern Ireland, than it would be obviously if you were Spanish or Italian or French even. But no, I think the rides that I did get, right from even the QB 250 Honda, even before I got factory support from Aprilia, I couldn't have really had any better at the time. Even though it wasn't full factory, it was as close to factory as we could get at the time, and we were, I think, doing better than most on a bike that was only a little bit below par. It wasn't too far away from the factory bike, so I look back on those days as probably the best days of my GP career, even though later on we went to Aprilia with the factory 500, twin cylinder 500. difficult years, and then Kenny Roberts' 3-cylinder, which again, slightly the underdog, it was much more fun to kind of be biting away at the heels of the factory riders on subpar machinery.
Yeah, I think Jeremy spent most of your career. Well, the one thing about Jeremy is his career hasn't finished yet. He's still racing. Age 51, are you now?
Yeah, for my sins, yeah.
And he was kind of always the underdog. He never really had quite the best machinery, but he mentioned the QUB years when he was riding, that's Queen's University Belfast, and remind me of it was Robert Fleck, but who was the guy before Robert Fleck?
Professor Blair.
Yeah, Professor Gordon Blair, who was a real two-stroke genius. So they were doing an awful lot of two-stroke development at Queen's University Belfast. So I kind of always thought that was a really cool team with a university sponsoring a race team.
Absolutely.
And they were very clever people doing some great things. And it was just lovely to see that a tight little team really giving the factory teams a real hard time.
You've just brought Jeremy in from Heathrow Airport in the back of your Triumph Tiger, haven't you? He looked a bit shaky when he got here, I got to say.
Well, we were in a hurry. We were a bit late.
Still shaking, actually.
I don't think I really. I didn't think. I mean, I'm much worse than that on my own. So I felt him sort of. When you're going too fast on a bike with the pull-in, when you get the sort of the squeeze, when you go for a gap, you feel them trying to make the bike narrower by squeezing their knees in. But we got here in one piece. So he's refused my offer of a lift onward to Euston. He's
I'll take
going
the car.
in the car.
I'm used to having my knees out and elbows out, and actually I've never had them so close into my body as I did today. But yeah, that's something to be experienced. If you might have some tickets in the post, but it got the heart rate up there. Yeah.
Actually, talking about elbows, Jeremy. MotoGP racing, or Grand Prix bike racing anyway, has changed quite a lot in recent years, hasn't it, in terms of how far you can get that bike over? I mean, do you look at it now and like I do? Well, not like I do, but I just can't believe these angles.
I think obviously the tire development has come on such a way, even in 10 years, never mind over 20 years, or from the Sheene days. Sure. Tire development, when they were just starting to scrape their knee, back in Kenny Roberts, I think was one of the first, right to what Marquez is doing now, which is virtually shoulder on the tarmac, or Scott Redding doing the same. Obviously, that's to do with Bridgestone's incredible development of the MotoGP tire, and we were lucky at the beginning when. With Team Roberts, we were actually the first team to use the Bridgestone, so I kind of saw how that was progressing at a very, very an incredibly fast pace. Whereby you'd go to one racetrack and really not have a problem with the tire. You'd have the engineers there; they'd be taking notes, and within 2 weeks they'd come back with a tire that worked on that surface. So, very, very clever. Company and obviously as time's gone on, they put that to good practice. The Bridgestone tire at the moment is better than anything's ever been, on certainly at MotoGP level, as are the Dunlops in Moto2. But I don't think anybody would believe that they would have been getting the kind of angles that they're getting right now, and sometimes to the detriment, because it kind of makes it nearly more dangerous in some cases, because there is no limit any longer. It's very, very difficult to find that limit, and even at warm-up, heat-up times are actually much more critical now than they maybe would have been with tires that don't sort of offer this kind of traction.
It makes for fantastic television, though, Matt, doesn't it? I mean, it's a really great TV sport, and the thing is, it's always exciting. There's always some amazing battle, isn't there?
Yeah, I think now MotoGP's in a really good place. When we had the 800s a few years ago, which were very different motorcycles, sort of small, much less torque, and there was only one way you could ride them, and everybody got a bit. We had 2 or 3 years of really quite horrible processional racing, but once they've gone back to the thousands, and Bridgestone have kind of made their tyres a bit more friendly, so you just get a much bigger mix of people that can ride these things to the limit. And yeah, at the moment it is just astonishing. And also Marquez turning up, he gave everybody a real kind of kick up the arse, and for whatever reason he's not doing it this year. I think he's not quite getting on with the bike the way he used to. But yeah, him and Rossi, sort of the resurgence of Rossi is obviously just, you couldn't make it up. and then you've got Lorenzo, who seemed to be finished once Marquez came in, and has now come back. So it's just astonishingly good at the moment. Every race you are sort of on the edge of your seat.
You are.
I recently watched the Hitting the Apex documentary, which is fantastic. Really enjoyed it. About the last sort of 15 odd years or so of racing. Do you think this is the best era that we've seen? I mean, it's been such a great era for.
It's a good question. I think that's typical of every generation. Every generation believed that they had the best years of GPs. You go back and listen to anybody that watched or knew Mike Hailwood. That was their. He was, in their eyes, Mike the Bike, the greatest racer of all time. Our era at the moment, my era at the moment, was coming from the Wayne Rainey years into through Swans, Mick Duan, right the way through some amazing riders through my career that I got and raced with DeGiro Cato, and then Valentino Rossi, and that I think is the generation right now have probably got what we believe is the best. But you speak to that older generation, that they still believe that Mike was or Ralph Bryan's before that.
Yeah, I think I would say now is the best racing we've had since the era. Jeremy was lucky enough to be, when you were first in 500 Grand Prix with Duan, Schwantz, Lawson, Gardner. That was a very, very, very special era for all kinds of reasons, and I think we're pretty much there now. We've got 3-4 guys who are battling all the time, and people say these bikes they're easy to ride compared to the 500s. Well, they might be easy to ride, but no bike or car is easy to drive to the limit. They all take a different skill or a different way of riding to take them to the limit. So it doesn't matter what you're on, it's still difficult to take it to the limit. The 500s were less forgiving, but these things can be pretty scary as well. I mean, they're doing 225 miles an hour down the straight at Mugello, cranked over through that kink that didn't even used to be a corner with one wheel in the air, and then which is where Marquez crashed last year, at 209 miles an hour. I mean, it's scary stuff, which I think it should be. That's why I like it, because it's on the edge of your, you're on the edge of your seat.
When I started my career, from the early days with the 500 Yamaha, it was a privateer Yamaha, but everybody believed that was the most difficult bike to ride back then. I don't believe it was, looking at today's machinery. Certainly it would bite you back. They had a really bad habit of seizing, in the most inopportune time on the circuit, or a gearbox locking up solid, or flicking you over the the handlebars, just because it made it had such a small power band. But I think today's bikes have got to be more difficult to ride than those 500s were.
Who were the riders that inspired the young Jeremy McWilliams?
Watching way back, when we watched the Pro-Am 350 of it, which I think you probably raced in. You could be old enough to race in that, weren't you?
Yeah, I think I did.
So you said Mat Oxley inspired you?
Well, certainly wasn't Matt that inspired me, but other riders in that generation might have. The Neil Mackenzies and Chambers from memory.
Yeah, Steve Chambers, Neil Mackenzie, Kenny Irons, Rob McElnay, all that kind of late 80s surge of British talent, which was actually, I think we're now back to where we were for the first time since then. We've got a good group of, Jeremy, when he was doing Grand Prix, as far as Brits getting near the front, was pretty much on his own, I think, weren't you? There wasn't really anybody else British around.
There's quite a few at the time, and when I started, there was Sean Emmett and John Reynolds came from British Championship into Grand Prix, so we were kind of the three at the time. Neil Mackenzie was still the daddy. He was the one to beat, and it took us a while to get up to Neil's level, and then I remember beating him then the year after, about 94, 95, and I think that's around about the time when Neil's career, I think he came back to British Championship then, but his GP career kind of basically fizzled out at that time, and so there was really, it was whoever could stick at it the longest, and that's really what happened. It was who could stick it, who could stay there and get another contract year on year was really how we progressed, and it was much easier to walk away from it than it was to keep at it. I very nearly walked away from it after 1 year through injuries, picking up really but serious injuries, and knocking myself out, and cracking vertebrae and doing all kinds of damage, and to a point where I had to go and get little operations in my hand to enable it, carpal tunnel syndrome and all kinds of just little minor injuries that kind of maybe just think at the end of the year, should I be doing this or not? And I carried on. Thankfully, I did. And then it got better. But it was such Grand Prix, such a difficult championship to step into. You see it now. You see riders that are at the top of their level anywhere else in the world. They step into Grand Prix, whether it's anywhere, Moto3, Moto2, or MotoGP, and really struggle for, like as Scott has, for a number of years until he's just starting to work his way up to a point where he's competitive.
It's good though, because it shouldn't be easy, should it? We're not talking about cars today, but some people say Formula One today is too easy, otherwise these young kids wouldn't be as quick as they are. It should be. The top should be the absolute top, and it should be a real challenge, shouldn't it?
It is. It certainly is. It's more, as you say, with Formula One, we still don't really rate Formula One as highly as we rate MotoGP. I'm sitting amongst car people here, and I know you probably don't agree with that, but we still believe that MotoGP is the pinnacle of any motorsport. And I think anybody that watches it as closely as we do, and as Matt was saying, the spectacle that it is today.
Oh, fantastic.
You can't not really agree with that.
Okay, let's take some questions from our Motorsport magazine readers. Mike Dolan wants to know, Jeremy, if Dorna was to reduce or even take away all the traction control, all the electronic trickery, do you think the same guys would still be at the front?
Yeah, truthfully, yes. I would, because the factories the factories that want to have the best riders still pay for the best riders, and the best riders will always rise to the top. I think if you took all of that away, though, it would kind of be quite it would be certainly much more dangerous to be trying to use 250 horsepower with absolutely no electronic aids whatsoever. So that might not be the best idea, but say you reduce the horsepower to a given 200 or whatever and took everything away, then I still believe that the top 4 or 5 would still be in the same positions. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Chris Hall wants to know, given that live television is unlikely due to the dangers, what can be done to secure the future of real road racing in Ireland and those other countries where it's still...
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's a really good question, isn't it? That's one that everybody will have a different opinion about, and I truly believe that since I've tasted real road racing, because I didn't really do it until I stopped racing Grand Prix, and that's kind of what Matt was talking about, where I haven't really retired. I kind of dip into 1 or 2 races a year, one being the Northwest 200, one the Armoy road races, which are pure road racing. And I think there are certainly races or events like the TT and the Northwest 200 and the Ulster Grand Prix and the Macau Grand Prix, particular road races that'll never, I don't think will ever cease, where the smaller ones are struggling more to keep up, financially, getting the coverage like the Armoy road races do, that they now get coverage, although it's not live television, it's highlights, broadcast within a week's time of it. But I suppose whilst there's always the hardened road race fanatic, which there are many of in Ireland and Northern Ireland and the Alaman TT, and that, whilst that support's there, those races will always continue. And I still think they're absolutely great spectacles to watch. A Northwest 200, to watch Hutchie coming back this year, the TT, and having an incredible year after such a bad patch has been as exciting to watch as maybe MotoGP.
How do you compare, spending most of your career on short circuits, and now you're doing road circuits? How do you compare? Is it more fun? Is it more scary? Is it, what's the difference between racing around a short circuit?
Well, you probably know, because you've done the TT, which is something I've never done. I don't believe I could have learnt the TT in the time that I've been given. It would have taken me probably 2 to 3 years to kind of learn where I was going, and I didn't have that time to put into it. Whereas with the Northwest 200, when you go up and have a look at it, you can tell quite quickly that there's not an awful lot of learning in it. So the approach is quite different. You have to ride with a little bit in reserve. Obviously, you can't just attack it like you would with a circuit. it'd be stupid to try and think that you can ride it like a short circuit, even though the riders today, and everybody will know who I'm talking about, the Michael Dunlops and who look like they absolutely attack it like a short circuit. I still think that every rider keeps that little bit in reserve.
And if you remade the Northwest 200 as a short circuit and stuck it somewhere in a big field, people would go around it faster, wouldn't they?
Absolutely.
If there was nothing to hit.
Yeah.
But do you enjoy sort of racing through sort of villages at 170 miles an hour? Is it kind of quite? I always used to just really enjoy doing silly stuff like that.
Isn't that just like coming from Heathrow with you? It's not the same thing.
Yeah, it was a bit, yeah. Joey,
Matt could take you around the GT course. You on the back. He could show you around.
He could actually. You could teach me. Although I think it's past me now. I've definitely got it out of my system. I don't want to do it. But Joey Dunlop used to say, it's just a blur of grey and green, and you try to keep it on the grey part. But that's really what you're doing when it's the build up during the week of the Northwest 200. Thankfully the organisation of the race is really top quality, so you've got time to build into it. If you're kind of thrown in at the deep end and you have to learn somewhere really quickly, that's when mistakes are made. And you've got 2 days of practice, so you don't really have to go balls out in the first couple of days. You just get yourself there, and really I don't really get going until kind of the first race, to be honest.
Yeah. And if you went to the TT, you're a big name, there would be kind of horrible pressure on you to perform, wouldn't there? And you just don't want to go there with that kind of.
I just I don't think I would be competitive, so there's no point. I'm not going to. I'm certainly not going to pretend that I would go there and be quick. I know I wouldn't be, so I'll just basically I'll give it a miss and do the other things that I'm enjoying doing. We got an invitation to go to Australia in January. I raced the Phillip Island International Classic. I did Indianapolis, the support races over the last 3 years with Harley Davidson, the Northwest 200, the Armour. Kind of just enough to keep me, just happy enough. Just out of
You're doing a lot of the weird stuff, aren't you? Classic racing, Harley Davidson racing, street racing. Just kind of really, I guess it's all different, isn't it? And it's a different, probably a little bit less pressure than what you when you were doing it fully professionally, and you're enjoying yourself.
I think you think it is until you turn up, and when you turn up, the pressure gets to you, and then you look around the opposition. The opposition have been racing this championship for the whole year, and you've got to dip in and actually be competitive. As I did with the Harley Davidson thing, I got as much pleasure out of winning that as I did winning the Northwest 200 this year with Ryan Farquhar, my teammate, winning one, and then I won the next one. So I think through your career or at end of career, when different things come along, you certainly get as much joy out of riding a bike competitively, wherever it might be.
And do you find that now in your early 50s the competitive juices are still exactly the same as they were 30 years ago?
I think it's even more fun because everybody knows I'm 50, and they don't expect me to be fast. so that's got another little edge to it, and it's great, being competitive to ride against riders that are in their early 20s still, but. As I said earlier, I'm picking and choosing the ones that I know I can do that at, and I'm not trying to dip into championships that I know I'll never be competitive at again. So it's a different
Jeremy
level.
still does a lot of work for KTM, works on their development team, so he's developing road bikes for them, and so he's still fully locked into riding all the time. He's done some film work, haven't you? So you've just kind of gone for hire, really. It's great the way your career just kind of changes direction every other day. You go somewhere else, and things have turned up that I would never have dreamed about. But yeah, I'm not really sure what's going to come along. But it's been a lot of fun, and still staying within the industry. And you know what it's like. Once you've spent so long doing this, there's not really much else for us out there. You've made your bed and you kind of got to lie in it. So don't fall out with people. Keep those doors open. Work with companies and teams and personnel that you've worked with before, and don't burn any bridges. And that's kind of been what my philosophy's been all the way through my career. Try to keep those things open, and it's worked out really well. If you remember, I nearly rode for KTM in about 2005, and for one thing or another, it didn't work out, and Shaky Byrne got the ride, and I walked away from it. But it came back, and now KTM asked me back afterwards, and I've been doing quite a lot of development work, as Matt says, on the road bike stuff, some race stuff.
some things that we're talking about for next year. I know one of the questions was, Pikes Peak and what have you. There's talk about that as well. So maybe there's things in the pipeline that are really interesting.
Well, actually, we have a question from somebody called McNewby. Yeah, well, anyway. And he says, are you serious about running Pikes Peak?
Again, that's a really good question, because you have to ask yourself, is it worth that risk? You have to weigh up what...
It's a big drop.
It is a big drop, yeah. And when you look at it, you watch the onboard footage, it's bloody frightening. Yeah, it really is. And it's, you kind of think, should I give that a go? And I probably will. I want to go and have a good recce at it and have a look and see, and then have try to work out how long to learn that. It's a bit like the TT, isn't it?
Yeah.
Only you've maybe...
How long's the road?
It's about... It's quite a distance.
There's a lot of corners.
I worked it out in corners. I think it was something like, was it 230 corners or something?
Wow, so that's, yeah.
So
I like the way you say it's bloody frightening. Yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah. Well, it's really go and have a look. I think a lot of tracks that I look at, I kind of weigh them up in how many blind corners there are. If there's an awful lot of blind stuff, then it's very difficult. And if you can kind of find the apex, then then it should be doable. But we haven't decided on it yet. It is in the pipeline to have a look at.
Well, that's the thing with the TT, that it is nearly pretty much every corner is blind, and generally the apex is, you can't see the apex, and the temptation is always to dive in early, isn't it? Because you think, I want to get into this corner, and if you go in early, you're going to come out really wide. And
absolutely,
a lot of the TT corners are so fast, you're doing 130, 140 miles an hour, that if you want to change line coming out,
it's no chance.
It ain't going to happen. So, that's the big thing about the TT is learning all those apexes that you can't see.
Frankly, I'd rather walk to Euston Station this afternoon than go on the back of your Triumph Tiger. If you don't, no offence, Matt.
I thought I was very sensible and very old, but I don't know,
Anyway,
maybe I'm not.
Jeremy, you mentioned filming work just now, and I've got to ask you about Scarlett Johansson. I think we're all a bit envious of you working with Scarlett Johansson in a film called Under the Skin.
Under the Skin,
what kind of film was it, Jeremy?
It was a bit different. I think we could say it's a bit arty. Got mixed reviews. Guardian gave it 5 stars. I wouldn't have given it that many, but then again, I suppose I kind of watch different stuff, and it was one of those kind of things that a door opened. I got a phone call and they asked me could I come along and ride in a movie. They wanted a bad guy in it, and I kind of thought somebody was pulling my leg, and then it transpired that when I spoke to the producer that it was what it was, and getting to work with Scarlett and ride through the Highlands of Scotland in the dead of winter was something else. It was something quite different, but and I really enjoyed getting into the character, I suppose, into the scene. That's as much fun as jumping into a race, because you've got to pull it off. You can't really make any mistakes. You've got a certain time to do it, and it was so you could kind of relate it to a little bit to how you prepare for a one-off fast lap or something, and it was certainly one of those things. I never thought I would have had the chance to work with Scarlett Johansson or even work with anybody in the movie, to be perfectly honest. But it came along, and I took it up and really enjoyed doing it. Yeah.
Okay, everybody. Well, if you want to see the film, it's called Under the Skin, and it stars Jeremy McWilliams and Scarlett Johansson. How about that? And I think you were saying it might be on Channel 4 soon. Right?
I think it was Channel 4 supported, and I believe it was either on last Thursday or this Thursday. It's on. They are now airing it on. It was in the movies, and now it's hit the TV. So
okay, we've got to ask both of you, Mat Oxley and Jeremy. At least I particularly want to ask you about Valentino Rossi this year. I mean, you've raced against Rossi, for heaven's sake. I mean, this guy, it really is. It's a piece of history, right, Matt? I mean, it's in every single way. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
It's completely, well, as far as I'm aware, it's completely unique. To be at the top of any sport for 20 years is remarkable. To be as on the top of something like motorcycle racing, which is, let's face it, it is reasonably dangerous, and even if even if you get out of it all right, generally, well, ask Jeremy. You get injured a lot, and eventually you get fed up with being injured, and you give up. But Rossi just keeps on going, and even if you think what happened to him, especially in 2011, 2012, 2 horrible years with Ducati, crashed 3-4 times as much as he did normally, kept getting battered about, and then was involved in that horrible crash with Simoncelli. His best mate, he was involved in the crash. I mean, it's just, I cannot work out in my own head how he manages to do that in his own head, and it's just fantastic. I mean, somebody was saying maybe Steve Redgrave was at the top of his sport for 20 years. I'm not sure, the rower. But kind of rowing is a little bit different from motorbike racing. I'm not in any way denigrating what he achieved, but it's just astonishing and just wonderful to see. Yeah.
As a top rider yourself, what is it about the guy that makes him just that? What is it? What is it he's got?
Well, he's certainly something very, very special, and really, MotoGP is kind of revolving around the Rossi era. Still is. There are other great riders, but not great characters, and I think that's what typifies Valentino. He's determined. Obviously, he's really determined, and what I really love about him is that it's nothing to do with the money any longer, because he's got more than he'll ever need, but the fact that he kind of wants to race for position, even though he kind of should be thinking about points, like in the last race where he fought with Pedrosa, and it really wanted those 5 points more than anybody else, but he wasn't prepared just to sit back and give Pedrosa the second position. He wanted it so badly from him. So I think that kind of typifies what the man is he loves just being in front of anybody else. He wants to win. He wants to win world championships at a ripe old age of 36 or 37, whatever he is now. And I think that's why we all love him, because he's just not kind of fading away, where we all expect riders of that age to slowly fall down the order and basically melt away. But he just keeps at it, and he's given 100%, regardless whether he's going to crash out or whatever. I think that's why we love watching MotoGP at the minute.
And the lovely at Aragon, when he got beaten by Danny, those points that he lost there could prove crucial to the outcome of the World Championship, and yet. In the press conference, in the press conference afterwards, he was completely relaxed and happy. A lot of riders would come in there thunder-faced, thinking, "I've lost those points. I'm so angry." But he just seems to be one step ahead of it all the time and just enjoying it for what it is. And I think he's just particularly enjoying being in the battle for the World Championship. Obviously, he wants to win it. Even if he loses it, he'll just shrug his shoulders and go, "Well, I lost it, but I gave it, and I had a lot of fun doing it." And there's very few riders that can, I think, get that much enjoyment out of it, whether they're winning or just getting beaten, like he did on Sunday. And I think that is one of the things. He just loves it, and
it's the elation of winning, that's really what it's about. There's nothing comes close, there isn't anything else that gives you that feeling.
Doing it better than everybody else,
There isn't anything,
Sure. Okay, Damien, let's get on to the Hall of Fame, because although we're mainly a car racing magazine, we also obviously include motorcycling, and it would be ridiculous not to. Agostini is already in our Hall of Fame.
Yes, well, there's 3 bikers so far in the Hall of Fame. So Surtees, who obviously straddles both worlds, Agostini and John McGuinness. So that gives you a flavour of what we're about. So it's obviously the big names, but in McGuinness's case, someone who didn't achieve anything in Grand Prix racing, but it's for his TT record and for what he brings to the sport as a character, which I think is part of the Hall of Fame as well. It's about what you bring to the sport and the personality you are and how the fans react to you. So it's these kind of guys that we're talking about. I've got a short list of people that I would put forward for the bike list. Simon has. I'm sure Matt's got lots of ideas.
Shall we go around the table with the short?
Yeah. Rossi for me is an obvious one to top the list as someone who's got to go on this list because he's still current, which is something we try to actually shy away from for the Hall of Fame. But how can you not include Rossi? And as you say, Matt, to have such a long career, it's something incredible.
Yeah, he's completely unique. There is no one like him. Unique is an overused and poorly used word often, but he is unique. And I would add Hailwood to that. I would add Rainey. I would add Duan. I would add who else?
Kevin Schwantz?
They're all on my list. I have to say.
Schwantz maybe. You know, it's really, Schwantz would be well up there. You know, once you get past Rossi and Hailwood, who I would say were the only two who are just absolutely, you cannot argue. After that, you get into
agree with that, yeah?
Yeah, I would agree with you. Certainly, we never saw the best of Wayne Rainey. You know, he was unbelievable at the time, and a big influence in my early GP career. You know, it was my favourite rider at the time. I suppose I can still call him my favourite rider. But then the Duan years were you know, so he was dominating a bit like Valentino was dominating right now. So I mean, Duan would have to fall into that category. Yeah, I suppose, you know, other riders. I had John Surtees. I didn't realise that he was in the Hall of Fame already. You know, just because he's the only person that's obviously done it in 2 and 4 wheel. Other riders that influenced me, or I watched way back in the day. You know, like the Tom Herons, winning, you know, world championships on 250 and 350 at the time. But
would you put Barry Sheene in there?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, yeah. Of course, Barry would have to rank right up there. Of course, he would. Yeah, and but I suppose, you know, because of Kenny, and I worked for Kenny, I rode for Kenny, and I you know, I kind of nearly would rate Kenny Roberts above Barry.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's.
In fact, when I said Rossi and Hailwood would be my, you know, top 2, and then there's a bit of a drop after that, I think Kenny would come
in there, yeah.
Quite close after that, and then you come into your Raineys and Schwantzes and Duans and so on and so forth. Yeah, he'd be up there, but I think he'd be down another step from Rainey and Schwantz and Lawson and people like that. You know,
when you're talking about Hall of Fame, it has to be somebody who's, you know, very special.
Yeah, you're right.
The Kenny Roberts thing is interesting because he was the first American to come over and do it in Grand Prix racing, and he changed the nature of racing coming from the dirt bike world. So it's the influence that he had on the sport as well, as much as what he achieved,
exactly.
isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, until Marquez turned up, he was the guy that came in and just did stuff different from the way everybody else was doing, and everybody else had to kind of catch up and learn from him. And not only that, you know, he won 3 world championships. His first 3 world championships straight off the bat, having never even been to Europe before, and the first year he wasn't even a full factory rider. He had one bike, and it wasn't until the middle of the season where Yamaha were like, "Oh, we better give you Chicotto's bike to kind of, you know, your Chicotto's spare bike to kind of qualify on at Spa or something." So I mean, you know, to do that, and he was racing a 250 and a 750 at the same time. So I mean, you know, when racing was much more chaotic than it is now. And then after that, he went on to run his own team, and he won 3 more world championship with Wayne Rainey and 1 with Kaczynski, and then he went on and built his own motorbike from the ground up,
I mean,
which McWilliams rode and scored the last 2-stroke pole position on. So to do that, I mean, no one has ever done that. Probably ever will do again.
And the team management distinction again is something that Wayne Rainey, of course, subsequently did very successful. One name we haven't come to yet, but I think should definitely be on the list, is Joey Dunlop. Again, no Grand Prix success, but I mean, all of those TT wins, I mean, just under cult. I mean, I know he didn't have the outgoing extrovert personality of a Rossi or whatever, but I mean, as a cult hero,
50,000 people turned up at his funeral. I mean, that's all you need to know. And not only that, what he did during the Bosnia War, which was he would go around his hometown area and around Belfast, filling his van full of medicines, clothes, food, whatever, on his own,
and
not telling anybody about this, and then locking it up and driving down to Bosnia, driving through sort of Serbian sort of, you know, roadblocks and stuff to deliver this stuff. I mean, and never did any PR or media or anything about it, on his own, and then drove home again.
And Formula 1 world champion as well. You know, we typically remember Joey for his TT success, but he was a Formula 1 world champion as well.
Something you said interested me just now when you said that Kenny Roberts was your favourite rider. Can you explain that a bit? So when you were younger and you were kind of starting into it, did you watch the guy and think, you know, I can see what he does on the bike? And tell me,
he was just kind of before my era, but we all knew about him, and it was nearly before it was really accessible, as I remember, you know, to watch it on TV, you know, like, because back then, I'm going back a few years now, but you know, it was grandstand, you know, whenever I was a kid. Then when we started to watch, kind of really started to watch racing proper, Wayne Rainey was the one to me that was at that time, just before I got into racing Grand Prix, because his 1990, 91, 92, I believe, too, were very, very special years on. When you watched, Wayne Rainey on a bike, that was with Team Roberts, and so that it was a kind of perfect package. I think that if you wanted to be anywhere, that's the team you'd want to be part of. It was very, very special. But Wayne Rainey, I remember a ride at Suzuka. It'll always stick out in my mind where he went backwards and then came back through again and won it.
That's what he after the race. Well, where he said he had an out of body moment, and I think Senna is the only other guy that I've ever heard of talk about that. And he actually said that he was going around and he was looking at himself and laughing. And
he was sideways.
Yeah,
I remember
because he could just do things, because he was on Dunlops that year, and he could just do things with the tyres, pivot the bike, and diddle it. And he won the race, having dropped back to like 4th or 5th, and came back and got Duan and Schwantz and Gardner or Lawson or whoever it was. And in the press conference, he was wanted to talk about the out-of-body experience, but he didn't dare, because he thought, oh my God, if I talk about this, these people won't let me back on a motorbike again. So, I think to have an out-of-body experience like that is pretty special. It kind of really tells you a lot about the weird things that's going on in your brain when you're riding a motorbike or driving a car at the absolute limit, getting into your subconscious and all that kind of stuff. It's fascinating, Well,
so I wanted to ask you, looking back, what was the best hour you ever spent on a motorbike? And what was it, when you really had that feeling?
There's plenty of those, believe it or not, that kind of does happen when everything just flicks, it kind of comes together and it becomes effortless. It doesn't happen very often. But, there are times where you think, I couldn't have raced that race any better. I've probably done as much as I ever could. And you get, maybe one every 5 years, or I suppose, or 10 years it could be. But I suppose that, that would hark back for me, back to the 98 race, when I was battling on a private 250 and trying to catch what I could see with the 3 factory Aprilias in front, and caught up behind Valentino and Rossi, and then had a fuel pipe come off the top of the tank. So the breather pipe, which, do you remember the old one, which used to stick on the top and then go like this around the screen and down into a catch bottle? Well, that popped off the top and covered me in fuel at Sachsenring. But Sachsenring at the time was a shorter circuit than it is today, so there was no really long straights. So kind of, the Aprilias couldn't really get away. So I caught them up, and then of course got covered in fuel. Managed to flaff about and get it back on again. Of course, they disappeared. I thought that was it all over, and then managed to catch them up again. It's a 250 race. Around Sachsenring was a long affair. Probably 40-45 minutes at the time. Caught them back up, got past them one lap after another. Finished second. Had a huge moment. Lost the front end, which I don't even remember anything about until Valentino reminded me on the podium, and he said, "Oh, you nearly crashed." I go, what are you talking about? He says, the black line that came off your front tire on the last lap, he said, went on for 50 meters, and I was so elated of what I'd just achieved, I completely forgot about it. So it's one of those races where I probably should have crashed, but I made it, finished second, and Valentino was third.
What about Donington 2000, when you were battling for the lead on a damp track on the Aprilia Twin with Valentino Rossi, who hadn't at that point won a 500 race? You spent the whole race battling back and forth on a drying line, I think, with Valentino, also Kenny Roberts Jr. on the Suzuki, and you were ahead. You got ahead. You were kind of pulling away, and then did you have the wrong time? I mean, that must have been amazing, battling back and forth with Rossi.
I kind of I came up through from nowhere, man. I was way back on the 4th row or something, and came through down track. We'd obviously made our tire choice. Everybody was on wets, but there were different compounds of wet. I was on a twin-cylinder Aprilia, so it was a lighter bike, much more like a 250. They were on 4-cylinder. Valentino was on a V4 Honda, and Kenny was on a Suzuki. But you make a choice, and you think you go with it. And I just took a slightly softer tire, than I could have taken. But then again, had I taken the harder tire, would I have caught them? And I led the race for about 13 or 14 laps, and it was one of those things. It just came came really easily. And then when I got to the front, I thought, okay, let's make a break. Rather than, had I kind of bided my time, it would have been, I probably would have had something left at the end. I had no tire left at the very end of the race, and unfortunately moved back from first into third. But still, one of the best, most fun I've had on a bike, and great for the British crowd because we got a track invasion. I could hardly get back again, and I only finished third. So imagine what would have happened had I won it. But yeah, it no regrets. Really enjoyed it.
They'll want you in the Hall of Fame, that lot will, because they'll be listening to this. Anyway, Damien, we must get back because we must sort of come to a decision about.
Yeah, so far we've got 7 or 8 names on the list. So we've got Rossi, Hailwood, who's someone we mentioned as an obvious person. Can we just sort of talk about why Hailwood's so special? What is it about him?
I only ever saw him race once or twice when he came back on the Ducati in '78. So I couldn't really. I can only comment from having spoken to riders who rode against him, people like Ralph Bryans, who was a factory Honda rider when he was, and so on, who was out on the track with him. And he was talking to me about a track they raced at in Finland, Tampere, I think, which is very, very dangerous, tree-lined everywhere, and bumpy, and sort of gravel on the track here and there, and they went out, and Hailwood came round him in practice, and just the whole bike sort of grinding on the floor, stepping out sideways, and on the verge of crashing. And Bryans was like, "Holy moly, he's not going to do that again." And he was sort of chasing him, and Hailwood was doing the same thing at the same corner every lap. The things were all ground out, sideways, out of shape, apparently crashing and just carrying on. And when Ralph spoke to him after practice, like, wow, Hailwood was like, "Oh yeah, whatever." He just, I think, he was just a complete natural. He wasn't he was sort of famously technophobic, but he could ride anything. He won a 125, 250 and a 500 Grand Prix at the same weekend. He could ride 2 strokes, he could ride 4 strokes, ride big bikes, he could ride little bikes, he could ride short circuits, he could ride the TT. He came back after 11 or 12 years out of racing and won the TT. So I think a bit like Rossi, he's just up there with the kind of gods, if you like.
But he is, is one of those riders that in the day when you had to win on both roads and circuits, and he was, multiple world champion and multiple TT winner as well. So he definitely ranks right up there, particularly as Matt said, when he came back 9 years later after he quit and came back and then won on a Ducati. Never ridden a Ducati, never raced a Ducati, and he won the TT. He won a senior, actually.
Yeah, and a hell of a nice guy as well, and obviously pretty good at car racing, and won the George Cross, the highest civilian medal in this country for getting, who was it, out of the car at the Right, okay, so, there's somebody who owes his life to Mike Hailwood. I mean, you can't get any better than that, really, can you? So
no.
And yes, we've got Rossi and Hailwood obviously on the list, and we talk about eras, and it's almost like there was a Rainey era followed by a Duan era. What was it about those two guys that meant that they stood out above the crowd?
Yeah, I raced against both. Unfortunately, Wayne had his accident in '93 when I started, so I didn't get to race with him after that. Whereas with Duan, Duan really etched himself on anybody that raced against him, because he was quite a really, really hard character. Really not a particularly nice person to get on with on the track. Lovely off, but on the track, he owned the track. Kind of a little bit, like they are now with Marquez, and I suppose there's that trait in many of those incredible riders. But Duan had no time for anybody on the track. He believed that was his part of the track, and if you were on it, he was going to run over the top of you. Which he tried to do quite a bit. With us, particularly privateers. It took a long time to actually get any recognition from the man at all. I had a fair few run-ins with him right the way through my first couple of years. That would take a long time to talk about, but in the end, we actually he got some mutual respect from me from somewhere somehow, and since then we always got on, just in our own, never close friends, but on track he was something else. I suppose Duan had more influence on me because I raced against him much longer, and he was basically just he was a machine, he was a robot, and I think that Mick Duan for me would definitely rank as one of those riders that would need to be certainly considered for the Hall of Fame.
And Rainey, I always just think of as a double act with Schwantz. It was,
Yeah, I mean that was, that was your sort of archetypal grudge match. They grew up together, racing each other in the States, and it wasn't a media hype thing. They truly did hate each other. If they walked into the same restaurant, they would sit at opposite ends of the restaurant. They didn't talk to each other.
Wow.
I mean, it was a really, and it was still like that when they got to Grand Prix. Rainey got so obsessed with it sometimes. He was more obsessed about beating Schwantz than winning a race in a funny kind of way, and didn't matter where he was. He just wanted to beat Schwantz.
It's a bit like Valentino and Lorenzo now, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, exactly. I think with Lorenzo and Valentino, it's all they've sort of got the sort of dislike for each other kind of fairly under kind of wraps now, haven't they? But without a doubt, it's there. Rainey, Schwantz, Duan, they all just had that astonishing control of those 500 two-strokes, which were evil things. If you're a very narrow power band, the tyres weren't as good then. It was the era of the high side when you get on the throttle, the tyre spins out, you shut the throttle, the tyre grips, and you're 10 feet in the air doing 130 miles an hour, and they were three guys who could ride those things absolutely to the limit, spinning the tyre out the corner. They knew how to get it over the top of the torque curve, I think was what Duan always used to talk about. If you could
get it revving.
Don't shut the throttle, keep the revs going to get over the top of the torque curve, and then the tyre will keep spinning and it won't suddenly bite and grip. So, just amazing skills to ride those things. And they all ended their careers injured in one way or another. Rainey obviously very badly, Duan pretty badly, and Schwantz also. They all stopped racing when they had more in them, because those things, even at their level, hurt them.
More astonishing, was Duan's comeback when anybody else would have given up. That would, for me, I'm not sure how many other riders could have gone through that at the time. You saw it was
the only guy now is Ian Hutchinson. Who I mean, Duan came very close to having his leg amputated and had his legs sewn together for 6 weeks, and then came back racing like 2 weeks after they'd been taken apart, and missed the World Championship by one point from Rainey or something like that. And now you have Ian Hutchinson, who's come back from a similar, the doctors wanted to amputate his leg, and he's come back and he's winning Grand Prix again and TTs again, and I just don't think any of us, well, certainly I can't just imagine how anybody could do that.
Personally, I think anybody who races a motorcycle should be in the Hall of Fame. Every time I watch it, I can't.
Well, it's really difficult doing this because we're trying to get a dozen names from the history of motorcycle racing.
Casey Stoner. We haven't talked about Casey Stoner.
Yeah, we've got at the moment we've got Rossi, Hailwood, Rainey, Duan. We talked about King Kenny, Jerry Dunlop, Schwantz. Maybe
I think he'd be in the top 12. Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Did he lose his appetite a little bit after Wayne Rainey had his accident?
Oh, definitely.
Because the trigger had gone.
It completely destroyed him. Completely.
Plus, he was carrying injuries, that he didn't deal with very well at that time, and it was easier to walk away from it than to carry on. He still got lasting repercussions from those injuries, obviously, but it's difficult to ride at all when you're carrying those kind of injuries.
And I think he knew that Rainey crashed a lot less than he did, and there was Rainey, poor Wayne in a wheelchair, and I think he just thought, hang on, the odds are stacking up on me. And I think he won a couple of Grand Prix after that, but a few Grand Prix after that, but the moment he gave up was, I think, at a winter testing crash he had at Phillip Island, and had quite a big crash at high speed and landed, and then about half a second later, the bike came out of the sky and landed about a foot next to him. And he just was like, right, okay, I'm not going to. That's a sign. That's a sign. I'm going to stop now.
Okay.
On our list so far, we also talk about Sheene. We haven't really talked about him as such. I mean, he won 2 titles. He was amazingly fast. The thunder was well and truly stolen, though, as soon as King Kenny came along. So what is it about Sheene, though, that stands out, why he should be on this list, do you think?
I mean, huge respect for Barry and so on, but I would put him I think I'd probably stick him in the top 12 somewhere, but he would be in the lower reaches of it. I mean, he won 2 world titles and then kind of had his ass kicked by Kenny for several years, but then did actually come back from that, and until he had that huge crash at Silverstone in '82, he was still competitive. And I think if he hadn't had that, I think that you might have had a kind of second Sheene era, you know, if you'd had the right bikes and everything. So yeah, I think he should be there, definitely.
Rob, you mentioned Stoner. He was on my list as well. What do we think about Casey Stoner?
I mean, it's up to Jeremy and Matt to decide, because I'm not qualified to decide. I just thought Casey, you know, I mean, I watched him a lot. He won a lot of races. He seems to be unpopular for some reason. I don't know. What do we think?
He's just an atypical type of racer again, that Australian, you know, kind of hardhead really, and very Duan-esque about something about him, and you know, it didn't kind of go out to make friends, and he didn't certainly made no secret of that. You know, he would have. He didn't suffer fools lightly, and or other riders.
As you found out with Scarlett Johansson, it's great to have a bad guy, isn't it? You know, he was kind of, you know,
you kind of need one, don't you? Yeah. But then again, you need a good guy at the same time.
The thing was that he had no interest in being. As you said, he was very like Mick. That he had no interest in being famous. He had no interest in being a personality. He had no interest in opening supermarkets or earning money through, you know, doing other things. He just wanted to race motorbikes. And go home, and he did that.
Fish,
It's exactly what he did, you know. And one thing, what really made, well, there were many things that made Casey special, but the one thing that really killed everybody else when he was around was his ability to go out. Lights go out, first corner, he's absolutely right on the limit, totally, and he'll do that for the first lap, and in the first lap he'll gain 1 or 2 seconds, and very hard to. And that Lorenzo learnt that, and Lorenzo spent several winters ago, basically doing that during testing, full tank, straight out the pits, and just go 100%. And that's why he's winning now.
Senna and Hamilton did the same sort of thing.
If he wasn't doing that, he wouldn't be fighting for the championship.
Riders learn off each other, you know, they copy each other, and you can see that at the moment, you know, and there's no secret about, you know, Valentino copying Marquez's style, for instance, you know, as did Jorge, you know, copy what Casey was doing, because Casey could turn up at a track and, you know, wheel the bike out of the garage for the first free practice session and be a second and a half faster than anybody for the first 20 minutes. So he would basically just go out and absolutely push everything to the limit, kind of just to stamp his authority on it, and make everybody feel a little bit inadequate. Yeah, he was very good at that.
I think we've just been speaking about Lorenzo. I think he, you know, I think he would be in there again in the lower reaches, and also Eddie Lawson, of course, he would definitely be in there. You know, he won 4 world titles when 500s were pretty.
Another one that sprang to mind, you know, would be even Freddie Spencer winning 2 world championships in 1 year, 250 and 500. But
and then never winning another Grand Prix.
That's strange. Because, you know, when you win 2 and you're so dominant over 2, which I didn't believe would be possible in 1 year, you know, not to come back, as you say, and not win anything again.
Strange. Yeah. Well,
can I go back a little bit even to before Jeremy's time and throw Jeff Duke into the mix? Because I mean, he won 6 world championships, I think there was also a bit of a rebel about Jeff Duke, wasn't there? Because wouldn't he have won a 7th maybe if he hadn't been suspended for striking and demand for more pay?
That wasn't demanding more pay for him. That was actually
riders
he was a factory rider, and because some privateers had helped him in some protest to get, I think in Italy or something at some point back then when he was first riding for Gilera, they only paid Italians prize money or start money, and he managed to get the Italians to come on his side and say that he should be paid.
Which is a feat in itself.
So when all the privateers went on strike at Assen in 1955, saying basically we're not performing circus animals, you know, we need money, and I think they got 20 quid a start or something, that was the offer or something. And Duke went on strike in support of them. You know, he was wealthy, had nothing to go on strike for. But so, again, he had something beyond him rather than just being a very successful rider. He kind of cared about other riders.
And also, despite racing in the era he did, he lived on into his 90s. So I think on many, many levels, he was a remarkable bloke.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Dame, we're running out of time.
We are running out of time,
guys.
Jeremy's got a car waiting for him. So we have got a dozen names here. I'll just run through, and you can tell me if you think that there's anyone glaring that we've missed off. So we've got Rossi, Hailwood, Rainey, Duan, Sheene, King Kenny, Joey Dunlop, Schwantz, Stoner, Lorenzo, Spencer, and Duke are our dozen. Actually, there's no Lawson on there.
No, we couldn't. We
We've
haven't
got no-
Lawson.
we've got no-
Should
we've got no
can we
sidecar
have
competitors
Can we have an
either.
unlucky 13, or isn't that allowed?
No, it has to be 12.
No sidecar races.
No.
Steve,
When we
Steve
did the
Webster
Formula 1
must
one,
be on the
we
list,
completely
surely.
miscounted and ended up with 15, so it won't be the first time. I miscounted, actually. It was so
And any thoughts on sidecars, Matt?
I'm
Webster
ashamed to say they never
You
floated my
have no
boat.
thoughts about them at
They
all?
don't. You know, I
Too much like
like two
cars.
wheels. I like two wheels.
I'll tell you
like
what,
two wheels.
I'm gonna make an editor's decision. I'll take Lorenzo out just because he's
racing now.
he's still got a long way to go.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
he's Rossi. He must be surely coming towards the end of his career. Must be in the autumn of his career at least.
Well, there's 5 or 6
Whereas
seasons.
Lorenzo, you can
I
see
wouldn't jump
going
to any
on.
conclusions.
No, that's true. So if we add in Lawson, that makes it up to a dozen. But is there anyone else there that we've missed off?
Well,
that
you know
we
you're
think,
going to get told you've forgotten about such and such
Yeah,
and so and
bound
so.
to. Yeah.
That's half the fun.
Yeah.
Getting told off.
So should we leave it at that for?
Yeah, because I
this
think
year.
it's an ongoing
It's a rolling
thing.
thing,
It's an
exactly.
ongoing thing. I mean, the Hall of Fame isn't until the middle of next year.
No, the voting will last now until the spring of next year,
Yeah.
before we actually close the polls. And as I say, this is an annual thing. So next year we'll do this again, basically, and come up with another list. Well, similar to this one, I'm sure, but we can always add other names onto it at that stage.
And they'll be on the website, on the motorsportmagazine.com.
Yeah. So after this podcast, you can go straight to cast your vote online. And as I say, it will be open for quite some time yet. So.
Fantastic. Come on, all you bikers, all you motorcycle racers, all you fans. Get voting. And if we've got it wrong, you tell us. And Jeremy McWilliams, thank you so much. Thank
welcome.
you for
Thank
dropping
you.
in between Belfast and Silverstone and a few other places that you're about to go to now.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much.
Pretty little logo you got here. It's nice. Yeah.
Shame we're
It's
not
not
here.
bad. We're moving office this weekend, so this is a goodbye to Chelsea actually for us. So it's nice. The Ram. We've recorded a couple of podcasts here before, and it's our local. So it's goodbye to the Ram as well.
Goodbye from me, goodbye from all of us, goodbye from the Ram, and we'll see you in our new headquarters next time we're with you. Bye-bye.